Hey everybody, welcome back to The Modern Trumpeter. This week our special guest is Craig Taylor. I'm very excited to share this one with you. It was probably one of the most impactful interviews I've done up to date for me personally. We talked about and covered so many topics that hadn't occurred to me, but in so doing enhanced the purpose of this podcast and the purpose of our book. Let's learn a little bit more about Craig Taylor. Craig Taylor is a trumpet freelancer and contractor in the DC area. He is the trumpet player and contractor for the National Theater as well as Ford's Theater. He studied at East Carolina University with Vince DiMartino before working full-time for Disney World and a little show called Blast. After years of touring with them, he found his way to New York and played on Broadway for a time before landing ultimately in the Washington, D.C. area. And before we get to his interview, as always, we have just a couple of quick announcements. Once again, the Modern Trumpeter book will be available in 2026. Inside, you'll find practical answers to questions every aspiring trumpet player asks. How do you get started in the industry? What are cruise ship gigs like? What songs should you know for wedding and corporate bands? What's a union? How do you find work as a solo artist, and what agencies should you be looking into, etc., etc., etc. With insights and stories from dozens of professional trumpet players working in jazz, classical, commercial, and military settings, this book gives you the tools, mindset, and insider knowledge to turn your talent into a sustainable career. Insights, stories, and behind the scenes of the music industry are provided by the likes of Wayne Bergeron, Bobby Shue, Bria Skomberg, John Watson, Marcus Printup, Glenn Marhevka, Dave Richards, Jay Webb, Jerry Hay, Brian McDonald, Kiku Collins, and many, many more. And now here's my interview with Craig Taylor. Maybe we can start with, where you grew up and how you first got into trumpet, and at what point did you know you wanted to make music some sort of career?
Right. Okay, cool. I did grow up in Richmond, Virginia. We had a really incredible music program where I grew up. As most of the schools like in Northern Virginia, Central Virginia, the music programs back in the 90s. I'm 43, born in 1981. So back in the 90s, the music programs in the Henrico County area, Central Virginia, Northern Virginia were incredible. I mean, like, incredible. We were extremely, extremely fortunate because our facilities were fantastic. Everybody had instruments available to them, like all that good stuff. My middle school band director, we had a full set of everything for everybody. So it was beyond the privileged section, if you know what I mean. That we had a contra bassoon in our high school band that high school owned.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I was really, really fortunate in that both of my first trumpet teacher, or my main trumpet teacher in high school, his name was Mike Davison. He was part of that huge Eastman crew from back in the 70s. Like, he was in school with Jeff Tyzik and Alan Vizzuti and Vince DiMartino and Chris Gecker and Byron Stripling. Like, those were all his classmates, and Tom Drake and George Vosberg. So, like, he lives in Richmond, has been forever, teaches at University of Richmond. So I got lessons from him in high school, and from the start, it was the same line that we'll keep on for this whole segment of versatility.
Right.
Yeah. And it was like, you didn't just play classical trumpet. You didn't just play jazz. You didn't just play lead. You played trumpet. And that encompassed like everything. So, my first lessons were from the Charlie Parker, bop duet books, or, the transcribed solos and Arbin's book. And we played along with the Gordon Goodwin play along books in high school and all that kind of stuff. So what was really different for me, and it'll be interesting for you to hear this thing, I was always naturally very gifted at the trumpet. It came very easy to me. I was, middle school, first chair, like all that kind of stuff. High school, my band director always laughs because we are now still friends. My trumpet got there my freshman year and didn't leave the high school until he called my parents for me to come pick it up when I graduated.
Nice.
So I wasn't like a heavy duty practicer. I knew I loved it. I knew I loved playing it. It was something that like I could be a part of, but I was super involved with sports. So like I was a 3 varsity sport player in high school too. Baseball was my main thing. So I actually started off going to college for baseball. Okay. And that kind of weaned off a little bit, and then I ended up being at East Carolina University. Lo and behold, I went and heard a jazz concert, and I was like, man, you know what? This was always something I loved to do, but let me give it a shot. Because like I was kind of lost. Like, okay, well, baseball's not going to be it. What do I do? Oh, let's play the trumpet, right? And, it was very fortuitous, universally cosmic. The fact that at that time, the interim trumpet professor at East Carolina University, or the visiting trumpet professor at East Carolina University, was Vince DiMartino, who was directly, in line with Mike.
Yeah.
And so I auditioned for the music school and got in there and studied with him the time, because I think that was after he had left Kentucky, before he went to, is it Center College or whatever it was in Danville. So like I went directly from a Mike Davison, who taught the Eastman trumpet way, directly to Vince DiMartino, who taught the Eastman trumpet way.
Yeah.
And at that point in college, I was kind of like, I wanted to be an orchestral trumpet player. I wanted to be Bud Herseth in the Chicago Symphony. So like I pretty much only spent time on C trumpet and piccolo trumpet. And I remember, I was working on, it was either Zarathustra or, I forget what the expert was, but it was something. And I could not miss like the high C's in it. It was just flying out of the horn in my lesson. And
Yeah.
Vince is like, that's pretty easy for you, huh? And I'm like, yeah, that's the easy part. It's the transposition, articulation, like all this other thing. That was the easy part. So he's like, hey, do you play in a jazz band right now? It's like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm brass quintet. My brass quintet was, trying out and sending tapes for Tanglewood and like all that kind of stuff. And he was like, you should try out for one of the jazz bands. So anyway, I tried out for one of the jazz bands. He gave me my first like commercial mouthpiece, which is I still own to this day, by the way. His old Bob Reeves mouthpiece, and he handed me his original 6310. I think it was at that point it wasn't even the Bobby Shoe yet. It was like a 6310B, and I tried out for the jazz band, and I just like kind of shot off. And then, but with it coming from the classical world, everything was kind of like already under the fingers, and then I had some high notes, but I hadn't really worked on it. So I spent 2 years at ECU, and then after my second year, I got called by a buddy during the summer while I was working a ride at Kings Dominion, and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing this show down at Disney World. We just lost a trumpet player. Do you want to come down for the summer and work and play in the parks?"
Nice.
And I was like, sure." So I literally packed up my bags and drove from Richmond, Virginia down to Orlando, got off the plane, and walked into a show called Blast.
Okay.
It was, and Blast had the second version that was playing at American Epcot Theater that summer, and I found my people. Like I literally found my people. Like they were athletic, they were pretty, they were incredible musicians. It just like all of a sudden the wooden peg that I was found its slot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, this is kind of it. It didn't hurt that there was a member of the cast that I almost fell in love with immediately, just first sight. And she was older, and there was two casts that were there. There was a cast that was, they called it summer cast. It was just there for Disney during the summer. And then there was the touring cast, and they were practicing and rehearsing all day long, preparing for their tour, their national tour coming up. The Disney cast was there performing 5 of the nights of the week or 6 nights of the week. And all we were doing was a bunch of college kids coming down, you know, do our 4 shows a day and then party all night, go back to school, go back to our regular lives. But once I stepped into that genre and found that, I was like, all right, I have to do this. So at the end of the summer, they offered me a job for the tour.
Oh, awesome.
And I very specifically remember like being like, well, what do I do about finishing my degree? What about my master's degree at Juilliard? What about my position waiting for me at the Chicago Symphony? Like what about all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
And I remember calling Vince up because my parents were super, super supportive of it. They're like, I had just turned 21, go out and have a great time. And I call Vince up on the phone. It's like, hey, Vince, I'm here. I've got to be back to classes on Wednesday, but they just offered me a job to go out on the road with this tour. And he goes, well, what are you in school for? And I said, well, I want to play trumpet for a living. And he hung up the phone. So I literally left, everything, and went out on tour on a bus and truck tour for 9 months with Shockwave, which was Blast 2. And then after that led to 18 months living in London with Cyberjam, which was Blast's new show over there, which led to a Japan tour after that.
Wow.
All over the place. And we met a bunch of LA friends on the Japan tour, Amy Sanchez being one of them I just mentioned earlier. And we were basically flying back at that time, still my girlfriend, longtime girlfriend. We were still together. In fact, she's now my wife. We're celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year. So we literally flipped a coin in the air on the way back from Japan, whether we were going to move to LA, because a lot of the people were like, hey, look, your skill set will fit here in LA. You should do that. Or we were going to move to DC to be closer to our family. And I was going to try and get into one of the military bands. And we flipped a coin on the tarmac to buy our ticket either to LA or buy our ticket back to DC, and we ended up back in DC in 2005, 2006, and so
Okay.
I've been there ever since freelancing.
Awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Wow. That's such a cool story. I'm just
Yeah, it's weird to tell it every time too, because it seems like something somebody made up, but it's also like my life, which is also kind of weird and cool. So
I love it. Well, that's it's great to hear. Like, as I've been talking to people, there's people who've naturally just always know they're going to do trumpet and no question, and they do it. There's been people who I've talked to, like Bijan Watson, studied, I think it was like psychology or something, finished his degree, and then ended up doing trumpet. And like, or people, I've talked to other people who've play on the side professionally, but do other day job things like a real estate agent or something. So it's like you can go so many different ways, and it doesn't. There's no set way to do music and how to make a career out of it. When you were going to do baseball, were you hoping to like play professionally there?
yeah, of course, you always have that dream of I'm gonna get in the pros and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It was kind of one of those things where you realize in music too, it's like you're in your hometown and become a big fish, and then you move out to another ring of baseball or music, and you're like, wow, there's better people here. And then you work as much as you can and get big fish. I'd gotten to that last ring where like I was, at a Division 1 school, and
Mm-hmm.
I had worked my butt off. I mean, I'm 5'10", 5'11" on a good day, right?
Yeah.
And I was working my butt off, and I was on the practice squad the first year, and then like the senior graduated and the junior got drafted. So I was like, this is my chance. So I show up to the first like pitchers and catchers meeting my sophomore year, and like three JUCO transfers that look like Greek gods had come in and slipped right in the spot, and I wasn't going out drinking, I wasn't like eating bad, I was like hitting the weight room and training every day, and these guys were out partying and they were faster and stronger, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I was like, all right, there's your sign, right?
Yep. And then you go on from there. So
Yeah,
that's
and like you said before, when I got to DC, I had a pretty big decision to make too, because you had to figure out how to make a living right away. So I've always done another job during the day that wasn't involving music. Yeah, so I worked at Baltimore Brass Company originally when I got to DC, working on repairs, doing school repair jobs and stuff like that, and then
okay.
going to playing like every night, because I started to get a couple students, and then I realized that like if I wanted to be available for the calls that were going to come in last minute for a new guy in town, I couldn't constantly reschedule my studio class,
Yeah.
right? And then I also like when I started putting together, I was like, there's a lot of guys in DC that make very good livings teaching 25, 30, 35 lessons a week. None of those lessons can start until what, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
If you're going to play shows, if you're going to be on a sub list for a symphony or the opera house, like when are you working? Every single evening. So I realized I had to do something else during the day
Yeah.
that left freedom for me, both mentally and physically, to do the playing.
Yeah.
Because I think I didn't want to replace one income for the other every other week. And that's not fair to the students not to have consistency. Hey guys, I got a 4 week rundown at the Kennedy Center. You guys, you're on your own for the next month.
Yeah.
So I worked in a brass repair shop for a while. This will lead into the next thing. I started working. My father-in-law owned a pest control company, and just a single man, I worked alongside him for like almost 5 or 6 years. And that gave me unbelievable freedom, because we would work from 7 in the morning until 12, 1 o'clock, go home, be able to see some of the family, go off and do my job. And then ultimately, when we moved back to Richmond in 2015, I'll rewind a little bit. In 2012, I was doing a show in DC, and I got asked to go to Broadway. So I went to Broadway, and it was in New York for a little over a year and a half, playing in New York. When I came back, I started a pest control business in Richmond, which I've had up until about had for 9.5 years, and just sold last year.
Okay. So you
Yeah,
started this too.
started one from the scratch. Yep, and that again allowed me to like work my own hours. So when it was just me, I could literally go, okay, here's my gig schedule. I'm going to move my daytime stuff around and be available for anybody that called in all the time.
Yeah.
So it was two jobs that I kind of like puzzled in together. you know,
Yeah.
and all of that while, like, I was on the board in DC, executive board in DC for the AFM for 3.5 years. I became a contractor in DC at Ford Theater in 2016 and then at National Theater in 2018. So, like, again, it's like kind of like a bohemian way of doing it, but I think it's actually the only way to stay healthy as a musician because you're not all in all the time. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
if you're constantly only thinking music and you're only thinking, I don't know, it just allowed me a lot more freedom to like kind of be one more genuine to the music all the time
Hmm.
because that was a separate part of my day. And then I could focus all on it, put all into it every night, every show, and then go to sleep the next day, puzzle together a new day.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I had a friend who he's in town. He's like one of the top jazz commercial players. He's phenomenal, fantastic player. But he was, saying yes to every gig and doing stuff constantly all the time, and had to say yes to everything, even if he didn't want to do it, because he had to survive. And he got burned out after a long time, and he took 9 months, got a coding certificate, and does that full time. And it's remote, flexible, and he can go travel wherever he wants and do
Yeah.
any gig that he wants, and he's a lot happier with it.
Well, and the thing is, we don't talk about it enough from the education level down that burnout in our industry is a real thing too. They talk about it in government, they talk about it in medical, they talk about it in with the clergy, all of those different things. They have sabbaticals available. They have mental health time available. All those kinds of things because they don't want the burnout to take effect. And
Yeah.
they don't even have to do it when they go home at night, right?
Yeah.
They finish, they clock out at 5 o'clock, they go home dinner, have a glass of wine, go to bed, watch their favorite TV show.
Yeah.
Musicians, we are forced to immerse ourselves in it so wholeheartedly and give every minute of every day. It's not talked about enough that you can get burnt out. You will get burnt out. It's how you work yourself out to get around that. And then people are scared to say it. I'm
Yeah.
burnt out. I'm tired. And then that's when you get the musicians with the orchestras that are super grumpy when you go there and you're like, dude, you're making like $175,000 a year. Why are you upset? Because the last 25 years they've been told when to be there, what to play, how loud to play it, over and over and over and over again. And then yet they still go home and practice to make sure they give their all every time.
Yeah.
So it, I don't, it's been wonderful the last 20 plus years as a freelancer because I've been able to visit and being in DC, like I'm really close friends. Some of my best friends in the world are trumpet players and military musicians. And so
Yeah.
like I get to hear that side of it too. Like I think those are the best playing jobs on the planet. If you're a
Yeah.
young student and you want to play music, go into one of the military bands. And I'm just not talking about the DC bands. Those field bands are phenomenal and they are
Yeah.
incredible jobs. If you're 21, go try out for the Navy Fleet Band and get stationed in Honolulu or
Yeah.
Waikiki or Tokyo or Sweden.
Yeah.
Spend 2 or 3 years abroad and like enjoy playing your acts and like then you have time and your bills are paid and then you can try out for the top bands or you're getting paid to do a job to practice
Yeah.
and then your orchestral dreams can come true, whatever you want to do. Like I cannot reiterate enough, if you have the opportunity, those fleet bands are literally the gateway to a musical career.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I've talked with, Joshua and Brian McDonald and a lot of the guys in the premier
Oh,
band.
good.
And yeah, Kevin Burns, then they said how great it's been and how steady they have a job and they can do other things. Joshua's, he can go to the Kennedy Center at any time, do a show, and he still has his job. It's super flexible. And so I'm wanting to connect with more people who are like in those fleet bands too,
Yeah.
but always it just that's from a young age I've heard military bands is like a good way to go.
I think they have moved into like the premier jobs for our performance art
Yeah.
because the cultural climate and money and all that kind of stuff, your pay in the military is going to adjust to where the inflation is every year, right? Your
Yeah.
housing is stipend, your medical insurance, albeit, whatever, you're going to have medical insurance, right? You do your 1 year enlistment, you've got the GI Bill. You can go back to college on the government.
Yeah, which is there's so many benefits.
So it's so many benefits. And then then the networks that you create inside of it. So
Mhm.
after spending so much time around so many different countries and cities and organizations, I really think the military is like the way to go. I mean, it really is an unbelievable resource for musicians that I don't think gets touted enough. You just hear about the premier bands, which are fantastic. They're fantastic. But I'm just saying, like, I think the fleet bands are the way to go if to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, you have to start out because I know that you, for the most part, if you're in a fleet band or a field band, you can audition for premier bands with your commanding officer's permission and whatnot. But usually they're pretty okay with that. And so yeah,
Yeah, they love that. The paperwork is way less when you're transferring because you're not worrying about basic training.
yeah,
Anybody besides a Marine band, right? They've already been on process. They're vaccinated. Everything's already in the system. It's if you play well enough to transfer from a fleet band to the premier bands, they'll take you immediately.
yeah, which is great. Yeah, and even there's
Yep.
like I know like National Guard bands or Army Reserve bands where it's a part time thing, but you still get all the benefits.
Yep.
And it's like that's a great side gig too, and whatnot. So it's yeah. If I could go back and do something like that, I would. And kind of have my own.
Yeah. You and me both, brother.
And so now you're what are you doing now as of the you sold your pest control business a year ago. What are you up to now? Did you start another business or where are you at?
No, we're in a good place in my life now. I do a lot of playing. I mean, I just went out and flew out and played guest with St. Louis Symphony. I just went down and played principal for South Florida Orchestra this week with them Harrisburg. I do a lot of the show work on the outside of the Kennedy Center. Josh and I will split some stuff, but that's mainly his house in DC. But like I've been the house trumpet player at the National Theater, which is the main touring house in DC
Okay.
since 2009. And then I'm also the contractor and trumpet player for Ford's Theater. So like, uh, I've got a couple weeks of orchestra work coming up, and then I start a 13-week run of Sister Act at Ford's Theater here in town.
Okay. Yeah. And that's eight
And
shows
then
a week.
uh, 8 shows a week for I think 11 weeks of shows, a week of previews, and 2 weeks of rehearsals. And those are all CBA union contracts. So I've been a vested member of the AFM and contributing to my pension since 2002.
Okay. Yeah, that's a long so and that'll definitely help.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I said I think at last count I was up around 180 AFM productions that I've performed on.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I got the best job in the world. I was laughing. We talked about it when I was in New York a little bit, and there's a trumpet player up there, Tony Cadillac, that he says, "Man, you guys got the best job in the world down in DC because they'll sit on a show for 2 or 3 years. I get to play 6 or 7 of those shows every year."
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
They tour. I'll get Beetlejuice for 3 weeks. Josh and I just played MJ for 4 weeks together. Then I got Sister Act, or I got Wicked, or I got Frozen, or I'm playing Some Like It Hot this year. Like, it's like I get to turn it over, get a taste of everything, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was talking to I don't know if you would know him. His name's Brian Ewell. He's a trumpet player up in New York. And he was just playing
Okay.
with Raul Agraz on Back to the Future. They were playing
I know
for
Raul very well. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, he's on my list to interview as well.
fantastic.
Yeah, the show just ended. And he when I interviewed Brian a few months ago, he said, I've been on this for a year plus, and it's great, it's steady. Hopefully, it continues on for another year. And then I saw him post, and it's like, oh, it's done. Just boom, all of a sudden done. And now it doesn't have a steady.
It's the scary thing about Broadway.
So it's like I'm like, well, I can't. That's tough. I can't imagine that. But so, how did you get that job at the Forbes Theater and the National Theater as a player and contractor? What led you to those?
The player thing happened first, of course. So coming into town, I kind of didn't really have any contacts, right? Her family lived in Columbia, Maryland, which is just outside DC. Mine was still in Richmond, but I just I'd been on the road for at that point 4.5, 5 years. So we ended up buying an apartment, and I was literally just driving around our apartment complex one day, and I came out of the parking lot, turned left, and I saw this structure, and it was called Toby's Dinner Theater. Unbeknownst to me, it's like one of the most famous dinner theaters like in the country, and they get like first rights for a bunch of regional productions and have won a ton of major awards and stuff. And I was like, oh my god! So I literally turned the car back around, went inside the house. I printed out a resume, which only had like school and like my 3 tours on it, and tried to bullshit a bunch of other stuff on it, right? And I walked in the doors in the middle of the day. I was like, hey, is there a music director or a music coordinator or contractor or something like that? They're like, well, he's not here, but this is his desk. And I go in and it's just like a massively disheveled desk and like all like just piles of paper and coffee cups and at that time ashtrays like with cigarette. And I'm like, what in the world? So I literally just put the resume on the top and I took a sticky note off and said, please read this. 3 hours later, I kid you not, man. 3 hours later, I get a call. This guy named Doug Lawler, he was the music director there. And he's like, hey, I got your resume. This looks fantastic. What are you doing tonight? And his trumpet player had called out for the week, like sick with the flu or something like that.
Oh man.
So I went in that night and I sight read Hello Dolly for them and did the rest of the week. And I ended up playing almost every show there for I think it was almost 2 years and start,
Wow.
doing everything else. Meaning like every show, like I was there Tuesday through Sunday, doubles on Wednesdays, doubles on Saturdays for 2 years, they do 6 shows a year. And I was like kind of cutting my teeth trying to figure out the Broadway thing. And then Doug Lawler got a call from the contractor at National Theater and said, hey, we've got a show coming in here and none of the guys in town want to play it. Do you like, you want to do it? And Doug Lawler's, I've got this kid. He's got chops. Like you want to try him out. So Ed Walters, God rest his soul, he called me up and he said, I've got the show coming in. It's called Cats, and it's gone from 3 trumpets, knocked it down to 1 trumpet. And none of the guys that are in town want to play it. They think it's going to be too hard with 1 trumpet. I can't just hire you for it. I need you to come. I need to hear you play. And I was like, okay. He said, meet me at University of Maryland. He was clarinet teacher and doubling instructor at University of Maryland. So I went down to University of Maryland, and for 45 minutes, he put music in front of me, and I was reading overtures and small solos and snippets from different shows that he had stacked up. And in 45 minutes, he looks at me and goes, I'm going to offer you this show. But before you take it, I'm going to tell you 2 things. If you take this show and you play really well, you know, I'm going to put you on my rotation inside town. We're looking for like another first trumpet player, a really great show player. But if you take this and you don't do well, I probably won't be able to call you again ever. And won't be able to pass your name around. So
Jeez.
at this point, my wife was pregnant with our first kid. I was working at Baltimore Brass and playing Toby Simmons Theater every single night. So I was like, he's like, I'm gonna go get some water. When I come back, give me an answer. And I was like, of course, I was like, not even close to ready to play like a Broadway tour, schedule or anything like that. I made the decision before he like closed the door behind him that I took it. So I took it and I ended up playing. I ended up playing for Ed Walters until he passed the baton on to me as a contractor in 2018. Yeah, and that included every tour that came through there. The revival of West Side Story for the 50th anniversary in 2007 with Arthur Lawrence. And I originated the book for Mean Girls. I originated the book for If Then for Idina Menzel. I originated the book for Beetlejuice. That was all happened at National Theater. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool.
it's been a crazy ride.
Excuse me. Yeah, that's a scary. I'm sure was that a scary moment for you when he kind of gave you that? Not I don't know if ultimatum's the right word, but just like that. Like if you do well, great, but if not, then you're done basically.
I was in a weird place. I was in a weird place because like I'd lived these crazy experiences with touring. Living in London, half a block off Trafalgar. Touring Japan for 11 months, and you know, climbing Mount Fuji and having a champagne toast.
Yeah.
Uh, doing a national tour. Flying into Billings, Montana in the middle of January and having to like go get carted to the theater from our hotel in like snowmobiles. Like that was my life.
Yeah.
And then I was in DC. We had made this move, and I was so busy with working and the Toby's thing, I couldn't properly get ready for an audition. So I wasn't taking any auditions. And I thought my life had I was kind of just spinning the tires at that point, you
Mm,
know? I had to take the gamble, When a tour comes through a town, it's one of the most violent things ever for a musician. And I'll tell you why. Because
yeah.
a lot of times you'll get the book digitally 2 to 4 weeks out. So you'll get the book sent to you, right?
Okay.
Now we are lucky enough we get like a conductor's cam, so we'll have like a video of like the conductor conducting through the show, so we get all the cues and we can kind of hear if they the boat, so we can kind of play along. But usually our typical day at National Theater when a show comes in is rehearsals goes from 10 to 2 p.m. One rehearsal. We have sound check from 5:30 to 6:30. Opening nights at 7:30. So essentially, you're playing through the show 2 to 3 times on that first Tuesday.
Man.
It's Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, double Saturday, double Sunday on. So yeah, if you on that Tuesday, if you're not aware of like howing the pace or like anything like you can be dead by sound check. So that's a lot of people don't understand this. Like you get one rehearsal. Yeah, you get time to prep the book, but you have one rehearsal, and then there's a sound check, and you run all the big dance numbers and all the big vocal numbers, so the vocalist can get used to the house. The sound crew can design the sound to the space, and then the cast can hear all the dance numbers from the new band.
Yeah.
So it has to be full out. It has to be full out.
Yeah.
And then you play the show for the first time at 7:30 in front of our house seats 1,800. So yeah. Ford Theater's a little bit different. It's not a touring house. It's what they call a regional house. So they do their own productions, right? Ford's doesn't do. They do play in the fall. They do a Christmas Carol in the wintertime, which has no musicians. But every spring they do a full production musical. We've done Into the Woods. We've done Guys and Dolls. We've done Hello Dolly. We've done a couple other ones. This year's Sister Act. We have an in-house orchestrator that orchestrates for a band of 9.
Okay. Wow.
So nine players only.
Yeah.
So his name's Kim Schoenberg. He just orchestrated Great Gatsby. He's won a Tony for Jekyll and Hyde. But he specifically is in our house and knows how to orchestrate for the 9 players that are playing there. And back to what we talked about before, Kim Schoenberger was in college with Vinny DiMartino, Mark Lusk, and Mike Davidson, my teachers.
Such a
big full circle.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Too small sometimes, man. Too small.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
It's great. There's speaking of small circles, in college there's a high school choir director that great program, and he would like call in these college players to come and play, help accompany the choir and whatnot for these different shows, and got to do that for several years. And then passed it off to other kids, college kids, after I graduated. So I was like, okay, doesn't pay as much as I would like it to now, and it was great. It was a great experience. Pass it on. Anyway, there's a brand new theater that's opening up here in Utah, and he is the contractor for a show they're doing, Jersey Boys. And he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to come do this?" And I was like, "There we go. Yep, full circle." It's cool themes like that.
Right. Again, we talk like you cannot. So you can always cross a bridge. You just can't burn it on the way over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, there are bridges that I've crossed over before and happily have never seen again. But like very few bridges I have lit on fire on the way over. You know what I mean? Because the business is just too small, and day to day it's getting smaller.
Yeah.
Because like the number of jobs, the number of opportunities are getting smaller and smaller. So if you're at the top, you're going to stay there, and it's squeezing out more of it. So you have to deal with the people, almost the same people, like all the time.
Where do you think the music industry, entertainment industry is going in the next 10, 20 years? Do you think there's still going to be the same opportunities, or are they going to be a lot smaller or gone entirely? Like what do you think?
I think it's going to be a lot smaller. I've had the opportunity the last 2 years to play with an insanely incredible and also insanely terrifying technology. It's called key comp, and it has been brought into the Broadway world. And it's not digitally samples, it's actual playing. And what it is there's an orchestra. The Disney started it, and they've had this technology for almost 20 years now. It's exclusivity rights last year or 2 years ago. So other Broadway companies and production companies are starting to use it. What they do is they take the score of Broadway, they take it over to Europe, and they record the score live with a professional, incredible orchestra. They digitize it inside the machine, and it's played by a keyboard 3. So keyboard 3 is playing the keyboard 3 part, but each time they play a different note in their own score, it triggers the score that has been recorded and follows it live time.
Jeez.
It's AI. So what happens is the first time I played was with Aladdin. Aladdin had gone from 3 trumpets on Broadway, 3 trumpets on tour. Now it's down to 1 trumpet on the tour with key comp. And it's so sophisticated that like if I decide to change something stylistically in the moment, it follows me. The other 2 trumpets follow me in the score.
Wow.
You can hear the fingers slide on the fingerboard when the strings are playing through this. You can hear the keys. You can hear the keys slap on the Barry saxophone on it. You can hear the bassoon reed start with the little hiss. You can hear the vibrato in the flute player. It's unreal. And we just, yeah, Josh and I both played with it on Frozen this past Christmas. Not this past Christmas, but last Christmas. And the technology had jumped threefold since the year before previous when I played it with Aladdin.
Man, wow.
But it's one of those things where my parents came to the Kennedy Center and heard Frozen. And my dad, who's a trained musician, thought there was a 30-piece orchestra. It was 6 live winds.
That's crazy. 6 live winds, probably no strings then. Just
they had a cello and a violin.
okay.
But they had the original Broadway stuff. I think it was, which was like 2, 2, and 3 or something like that. But what they do is when they add the score, they add a full string section.
Yeah.
They'll add 2 or 3 stands of strings, live playing strings with the key comp.
That's incredible.
Well, and like I said, it's one of those scary things. The AFM was made aware of it, I think, back in 2010 or 2011, and they just said, "Oh, it's going to be like keyboards. We'll be fine." And it's progressed. So the horse was out of the stable, jumped the fence, through the neighbor's yard. So it's one of those things that I fight daily in our DC local of like, we can't beat this. We can't like just say you can't use it, because what that does is it means Disney, MTI, Big League, any of the other production companies, they can pretty much say, well, we don't have to come to DC now to use the best musicians in the world. We can go to, I don't know, Loudon out in the middle of nowhere with a theater and play our key comp part and still sell tickets.
Yeah.
So where the industry is going, I think that like orchestras need to really, really kind of step back. And I don't think they necessarily need to move away from the classics, but they need to reinvent them and reinvite an audience with them. Like I think if you haven't checked out programs like Metropole Orc over in Europe or New Deco Orchestra down in Miami, what they're doing with concerts and what classics and new, it's cutting edge. And if an orchestra isn't looking for collaborations with modern artists so that people can get a view of what the orchestra is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, and then but see them with their favorite artists, like a Snarky Puppy or they're doing so many things with the orchestra now. And then what they're doing is like, okay, we're going to do this around Beethoven 7. Right? Interloop their music on top of it. So here's the first 2 movements, and then the last 2 movements we're going to put Nelly on top of it.
Wow. That's
but
that's like what you kind of have. You have to do.
But in 20 years, the boomer generation that has been funding orchestras for the last 50 will be gone. Are you in your early 30s, mid 30s? Where
just about to turn 30, yeah.
All right, so you're right there. Like, my parents never took me to the orchestra, and I'm in my 40s.
Yeah.
So it wasn't part of my culture growing up. And I was in orchestra, I was in a town that had a decent orchestra, but it wasn't part of like our entertainment it wasn't part of our entertainment package, right? So it's not being taught to my generation, which is right before your generation, that hey, going to the orchestra is cool, can be cool, right? Yeah. So I'm very worried about the orchestra structure that it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a sneaky suspicion that the orchestras that have encompass large endowments like a St. Louis, a Philadelphia, Chicago, National Symphony, New York, LA. I think those guys are going to be kind of safe if they're smart, right? Or else they're just going to be living off their endowments indefinitely. But a lot of those people have their endowments tied up in the stock market. What if we have a big crash? All of a sudden a $300 million endowment goes to 10.
Yeah, and then it just.
And if your business model isn't substantial enough, you don't have the backup plan to live off of. So I think right now, as a musician, you should be doing everything possible to be as versatile as possible, as flexible as possible, and as multifaceted, not just in the music. Like if you can do arranging, if you can do mixing, if you can do digital mixing, if you can do sound design, heck, if you can do programs for orchestras, like, hey, I've got a great band that would transfer great to an orchestra setting, that type of thing. Also, and Josh and I talk about this like ad nauseum. We were just talking about it yesterday on my drive up here. It's like the days of the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s where you were just a trumpet player. You played jazz, you played big bands, you were in dance clubs at night, you sat in with the orchestra. And that, I think that's the only way we survive moving forward. Like we talk about even towns now, like Richmond Symphony, it's an incredible orchestra. Yeah. But like they can't keep up with the pay raise. They can't keep up with their pay raises with the cost of living. So like, you've got to do something else to reinvent yourself, or you've got to do something else to keep moving up. There are only so many Phillies, Chicago's, Cleveland's, Cincinnati's that are paying above cost of living that you can sustain for long term. But in 20 years, is the $45,000 salary that some of these regional orchestras are paying? Are you going to be able to live in the towns that you're in at 45 grand?
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, it's like, yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be doomsday. I'm just trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do in our musical culture to like cultivate? Okay, what is the game plan? What type of diversity as you as a person do you have? Are you a good people person? Well, can you do personnel management stuff? Can you do HR stuff? Alongside of what alongside of the music stuff. Yeah, I mean I think there's a way. Well, I don't know what that's going to be.
yeah,
There's definitely a way, and the music industry reinvents itself every 10 to 15 to 20 years.
yeah,
All of a sudden now we're seeing country bands come out with horn lines, right? What? Now you got, big country stars going out with horns. Like
yeah. Okay.
that's changed Nashville's total scene now. It's like we got guys moving from New York to Nashville for the studio work, and now to hopefully get picked up on a tour to go out,
Yeah,
with that kind of stuff. So, but how many groups are gonna, how many trumpets are in a horn or are in a with a country artist? One, two, right? Maybe. So
yeah, and I love just hearing that. Like, yeah, you need to be versatile. Would you say you need to be able to do everything classical and everything jazz, commercial, just be able to do it all, or can you
I think
focus
you need to
on
have like
certain stuff?
I think you need to have like a strengths and stuff like that. I was talking to somebody just the other day. It's like, everybody has holes in their play. I
Yeah,
don't care what level you are. You know,
right.
I don't care who you are. You have holes in your playing. As long as you are continuing to work on and fill those holes so they're not as deep. You know what I mean? So
Uh-huh.
like I basically said, okay, if you're running on trail, what's the best thing you do? That's your level ground, right?
Yeah,
And everything that moves out from that is a different hole. So like for me, my commercial lead playing is right next to my classical playing. And then my improvisation is a little bit deeper. But I put dirt in that hole all the time when I can.
yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So, I was like a piccolo trumpet specialist with brass. I can pick up the piccolo trumpet without ever touching it for like a year and get away with a Messiah or Bach B minor Mass or Penny Lane without even blinking. But I spent a lot of time filling that hole up when
Yeah,
I was younger. So I say that as long, find those holes and just add a little dirt each time. And then when you're running along, it's not such a far drop off,
yeah, yep. Makes
if
sense.
I get called for something and I haven't touched it for a while or it's not my strength, I don't want to have to drop everything around me to like focus on that for 2 weeks before one gig that pays $200.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I can't eat today, I can't work out, I can't say yes to this gig because I got a gig where I got to play a bebop solo for whatever, but that also tells you, I got a very good piece of advice from somebody here in DC when I first moved. I said, in your younger career and stuff like that, sometimes your best career moves are your no's.
Yeah,
Sometimes the best career moves that you can make are the no's that you say. Like, yeah, I really need this money, but I've got to say no because if I go and embarrass myself, that's going to hurt long term more than short term.
yeah. Mhm.
Sometimes, and like I said, sometimes a no can be the best career move ever than a yes.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So, I've talked to so many people. They were like, "Oh yeah, I just said yes to everything," and I'm like, "Okay, like I think that's good, but yeah, there might be a time or two where it's like, yeah, you got to say no and it would be better than saying yes." And it can depend on so many different things, but
Yeah, I had one very, very close call pretty early in town here where I was doing a solo with like a new music group at the Polish embassy, like 3 days of rehearsal and one night of a concert. And that like backed up right to like really heavy commercial playing, like playing pops for one of the orchestras here in town. And I was relying on my background and my abilities to like just basically go sight read and have my chops together for the commercial thing and focus on this like really stringent, hard cornet solo that I was doing with this new music ensemble. I should have said no, but I fell on my face on that weekend. Like it
mm,
was bad enough that like I don't I think they would have fired me if it wasn't just more than just a one thing, but I knew it. Like I knew I was like, man, I sound like trash. Like it was bad.
yeah,
And luckily, it didn't tank my career. I had to like kind of like I didn't have to like crawl out of it where I didn't lose any work over it, but I definitely didn't go back and play with that orchestra again for about 10 years until the
Yeah.
personnel manager and the music director left. Because it was like I was being hired by the principal who had sat next to me umpteen other times, like, this guy's going to come on and blow this away. And I took advantage of the situation. I should have said no. And I said yes. And it almost probably cost, me and that principal didn't ever really get along after that. We never really talked about it. But, like, he sent me there in good faith. I went in, did not do a great job.
And then,
No, it should have been a no. I maybe made like $400 for the day or something like that,
yep.
right?
Yeah. Well, that's great. Cause like, and that's something that like, if you mess up, it's like, you don't know how, if you could like recover from that
Right.
and you just never, I think that's what can be intimidating for maybe like a young trumpet player is like, yeah, if you miss it, it could be done. But hopefully that's not the case. And you had other stuff going on too. So that probably helped out as well. So kind of going back to what you said earlier, you started your own business and whatnot. Maybe could you talk a little bit more about the decision behind that and kind of how maybe how you were able to work both playing and that job and at the same time for
Okay, so really quickly, so the reason that we'd moved to Richmond and I decided to start this business is I basically quit trumpet for like 2 years. So I got to New York and I had got my first show. I was subbing on Radio City and a couple other shows, and I had just been offered my second show. And I went out, and I'll keep names out of this. I went out with some like the heavies in New York one night. I just audited Book of Mormon for Raul, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna go hang out and stuff like this." And so I went and hung out with a couple of, I would call them the Mount Rushmore, and I'm gonna leave, like I said, I'm gonna leave the names out of everything else. The Mount Rushmore of trumpet playing in New York at the time, and this is 2013, 2014, 2014, and I was, my wife and kids were still living in Maryland at the time, and I was in New York, so I was doing my minimum of shows, driving back, doing the family thing, going back, doing my minimum shows. Once I got the second show, we were like, okay, let's kind of move up here. But I was sitting around, it was a Tuesday night. We were having drinks till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And like all of a sudden the conversation just got really dark. It's another thing we don't talk about in the business. When you are successful in the music business, you're gone. You're gone. Some nights, sometimes every night of the week. So I had missed birthdays and missed wedding anniversaries and Christmas Eves and New Year's Eves and Thanksgiving days and like all this kind of stuff for years. And I was sitting around listening to all my heroes, and they were basically talking about like how much they'd missed in their kids and their families' lives. And here I had a brand new wife and two beautiful kids living 3.5 hours away. And the next morning I called the New York contractor. I had a light bulb go out, called the New York contractor and said, I can't do the show. I'm going home. And I drove that next day, packed up my apartment in Astoria, drove home to Maryland. And 3 days later, I took everything I owned trumpet wise to Baltimore Brass, except for my 4 original mouthpieces, including the one from Vince. And I sold it all. And we moved to Richmond. So it was that the business was out of necessity. I was trying to figure out what to do with my life at that point, right? And the business was out of necessity of like, okay, what do I do? But I'd worked with her father, so much in the pest control industry. I was like, well, I want to start my own business. I don't want to work for anybody. So that was like the natural thing. And and I talked about this when I do master classes. I've done master classes at Hart and University of Maryland and Towson and Catholic and stuff like that. The skills that you procure as a freelance musician transfer into every business on the planet. And they transfer so smoothly and so, I want to say, aggressively. Like, I could take any freelance musician who is successful into the top 50 companies in the world, and guarantee that within 5 years, they would be the number one salesman, the number one directors, or whatever else, because the interpersonal skills that are required to be a freelance musician on a day-to-day basis, you can do anything. Anything. You have to deal with so many different personalities. You're firing on so many cylinders at the same time. You're juggling finances, and you're juggling time management, and you're juggling artistry, and you're juggling people skills. Like, it's like all the things that all the companies focus one at a time on, we do every day, all day long for our entire careers. So I knew starting a business was going to be in my future, because I was like, okay, once I got around what I was going to do. And that's how it started. And then about a year and a half after that, maybe 2 years, business was kind of rocking and rolling. And my wife was like, okay, thank you for doing this, but you've got a big gaping hole right in the middle of you. You got to start playing again. And what was cool about it was, not in 2 weeks after she said that, I got a call from Ed Walters at National Theater. And he said, hey, West Side Story is coming back to National Theater for a couple weeks. Conductors requested you play. What do you want to do? And I said, give me a week. Let me see if I can pull it together. And so I ordered a trumpet off of whatever that I ordered a Yamaha trumpet. I think it was a Bergeron off of musiciansfriend.com.
Wow.
Got it delivered to the house and spent about a week trying to get my face back together. And I called him back up and like, all right, let's do it. And so then I got back into playing, and then that's kind of been it now.
Yeah, look at that. Cool. See the like you were in going, you were doing it, making it, then like, okay, yeah, this isn't gonna work for, my family and my life and everything. And that's I thought you might have like still played a little bit, but you sold everything. That's great for
It
2 years.
didn't touch the horn. Didn't touch it.
And
Yep.
then you came back to it. So wow.
And everything now has been like this wonderful balance of like, okay, right before the business sold and stuff, it's like, I was working Monday through Thursday, like 8 to 1 or 2 o'clock, and then go and play as much as I wanted, but like not missing sporting events and not missing, I haven't played a New Year's Eve job in 10 years. I haven't played a Christmas morning job, or, I don't take the stuff that takes me away from the experiences. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I have that luxury because I wanted to design a different way of doing this that way. You
Yeah.
know, Josh and I have come to a really great agreement with like shows that come into the Kennedy Center. If they're more than like the last couple that have been 8 weeks, we'll split them, because who
Mhm.
wants to spend 8 weeks away from your family,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
he's got a little Harry's, I think, not even 2 yet. So like, he's got to be there for Christmases and like all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
like, my kids, I graduate one this year and then another one next year. So I'm almost done. I made it. They're alive. After that, they're on their own. So it's easier for me to do, around holidays now, because they don't necessarily want me around anyway at 17 and 18. But I mean, but like the life career balance is, I love it now. I love that I do these little trips now with Harrisburg. Still, I come up, give me a hotel, gives me 4 or 5 days or 3 or 4 days away from everything, and get to play some great music. And I drove out to St. Louis and caught up with a bunch of friends on the way out there. Did a concert for their Christmas stuff, and then drove back and caught up with more friends on the way back. So yeah, I'm just kind of have trumpet will travel now at this point. You know,
Yeah.
I kind of look at myself as like a merc, like a mercenary, because
Nice.
I don't really have any social media. If you look at my Facebook page, I think I got like maybe 200 friends. I don't have Instagram. I don't have any kind of stuff like that. So like, if you need me, you have to find out how to get in touch with me, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Wow, that's cool. Your whole story has been great to hear about.
it's definitely not the like, private lessons, all county band, undergrad,
Yeah, yeah,
grad school, like,
yeah,
yeah, which I thought that was me. I thought that was going to be me. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And I
Mhm.
I just kind of let it go where it wanted to go. I didn't really fight it.
Yeah,
I knew by getting here in DC, like I wasn't going to compete as a classical trumpet player. I mean, you've got Phil Schnedeker and Billy and Tim White and Amy McCabe and Tim, like it just all these unreal classical trumpet players in all the military bands, plus our 3 orchestras. Like, why would you? Chris Gecker's freelancing around here. Like, who's gonna
right.
call Craig Taylor for a church gig when Chris,
Yeah,
Chris Gecker's like right there? So I,
yeah,
I had to I had to listen to what the town needed me for,
right,
and
yeah.
that's very important. If you get to some place, you can work. Not it may just not be what exactly you want to do. Like
Mhm.
it like I said, they needed a freelance show player here in town. That was, not a screech trumpet player, just a great first trumpet player. They needed somebody that was able to, and that could do 6, 7 weeks in a row. Because that's the thing with the military guys, they have flexibility, but like at the drop of a hat, we had somebody here this weekend in Harrisburg that got called in for one of the inauguration parade rehearsals, got switched on Sunday. So
Mhm.
they called yesterday, before 2 hours before our first rehearsal, and said, I can't come this weekend
Yeah,
because the band said I had to be there.
yeah. That's tricky. Yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky. Listen to what the town's telling you, and you'll work.
yeah. Yep, definitely. That's what I've been kind of figuring out, where I'm going. When I worked for a company for the last 10 years, that like it was an after school program, bring kids together, perform, and get out, play, tour, work with guest artists and stuff. And it was great. I loved it. I was in it in high school. I loved it. That was going to be my career and my future. And I got married just about a year ago, last March. Uh,
Congrats.
and thank you. And I was gone till I wouldn't get home till 8 o'clock at night for, night after night. And then the weekend, sometimes we'd be busy, and I was just like so busy. And now I have a kid on the way too. And so, which is exciting.
Getting it all in. I love it.
Well, yeah. And so it's like, and then I got laid off from that job in September. And so, get on the way, trying to figure out what I'm going to do, and doing my own program of sorts. And it's been great, kind of the business side of it and learning the entrepreneurial side of everything. But because I'm starting out and there's a lot less, I have so much more free time with my wife and my family, and so it like has opened my eyes up to like, oh yeah, this is important. I don't want to be gone. I don't want.
Once you get that, you never want to let it go. It's
Yeah.
like one of those things. And I've talked to Josh, and I have talked about this, and several other musicians throughout like my career. It's like once you get a taste again of what you're actually out there working for, it's so much easier to go out there and do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's like, man, I really don't want to go do this gig right now, but man, that little smile that said goodbye to me right before I left it. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go make this money.
Yeah. Yep. It's just the whole perspective. So she's not here yet, but I'm looking forward to it, of course, and then it's gonna change my perspective a lot, I'm sure. So
Yeah. Well, like again, the spouses a lot of times take the brunt of it.
yeah.
Because they're the single moms, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes, when you're and I didn't learn until a little bit later, and I got that every time I'm home, I'm doing every single chore ever.
Yeah.
I could come home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and if there's dishes in the sink, I try to make sure they're away. I try to make sure everything's picked up because
Yeah.
they've been doing it for 2 days or a whole day by themselves, and
Yeah.
they're just as tired, if not way more tired, because they have to deal with the little shitheads the whole time.
Yeah. Definitely that the whole time. Yeah.
Or, they're working a full day, coming home, and then having to do mom and dad stuff.
Yeah.
Because if at that point, my kids were in school, so I didn't have anything during the day sometimes, and then I leave before she gets home, and then the kids get home off the bus. So she works a full day, comes home, has to cook, has to get them to bed, all that kind of stuff, and I'm off, playing a piece of tubing.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool and inspiring to just hear about that and how you gave it up for your family and whatnot, even if it was for a little bit. Things worked out. So I applaud you for that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's been great. Like, just been great to hear just all of it, and a lot of things I wasn't expecting to hear, but it's been really great. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Good luck with everything. Congrats on the babies and the marriage.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So we'll see you later. Bye.